Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Hello, this is Lal from puredhamma.net. In the first discourse, we set up the background to discuss the three marks of existence, or the three characteristics of nature, or Tilakkhana. We discussed the opposites of anicca, dukkha, anatta, which are nicca, sukha, atta. It is important to listen to that discourse before listening to this one. Otherwise, some things may not make sense in this desana. So let us start with anicca. At the website, I have discussed several meanings of anicca and pointed out that the Buddha meant by that word something much deeper than just impermanence. These days, anicca is basically just translated as one word, impermanence. But that word has a much deeper meaning. So here I want to use a somewhat different approach to see the picture from a different viewpoint. As I have mentioned many times, there are multiple ways to understand these key terms like anicca and anatta. But once one understands one aspect, it is easier to understand the other aspects too. The root of the deeper meaning of anicca is stated in a single verse in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first sutta delivered by the Buddha. It says, Yampicham nalabati tampi dukkham. Here, Yampicham is really three words, Yam, Pi, Icham, or what one desires. The key word here is Icca. Icca means liking or even craving. There are two words that keep coming up in the explanations of how dukkha or suffering arises. One is avidya and the other is tanha. Avidya is of course the ignorance of the Four Noble Truths or of Tilakkhana, as we discussed in the first desana. Tanha, or getting attached via either lobha or dosa, has its roots in cravings. Iccha is another word for cravings. This is very important to understand. One craves something because one likes that, and one has a nicca sanya associated with it, as we discussed in the first desana. So iccha or craving is really what leads to tanha. One gets attached to something either with greed or hate. Hate arises when something gets in the way of getting something one wants. So whether one ends up having greed or hate, both start with craving or iccha. So iccha is a very important keyword. It is iccha that gives rise to the nicca sanya. When one values something, one has the perception that it can bring happiness. That is the nicca sanya that arises due to iccha or craving for that object. So it is important that one really understands what is meant by sanya. There are many posts on sanya, but one should at least read the one entitled Sanya, what it really means. So we think that we somehow get possession of that sense object, we can be happy and be in control of the situation. That is how we cultivate the nicca and atta sanya, as we discussed in the first desana. So now we see the connection from iccha leading to nicca sanya, which in turn leads to sukha sanya, and then it leads to atta sanya. But all these are wrong perceptions or wrong sanya. This is called sanya vipallasa. or distorted sanya. When person X has the Nicca sanya about something, X could be motivated to do whatever it takes to get hold of it. The end goal is always a sense pleasure or a pleasurable future. But the problem is that if we do immoral things to get that object, then laws of karma will make sure that it will lead to bad consequences in the future, even if it may lead to happiness in the short term. As we discussed in the first Desana, there is a summary statement that states what anicca means in a simple way. That is, if something eventually leads to suffering, even if it brings immediate happiness, that is of anicca nature. That is the main idea. So let me repeat. If something eventually leads to suffering, even if it brings immediate happiness, that is of anicca nature. So that is why the first Desana is so important. This is really what we are ignorant of. That if we do immoral things to get what we want with the Nicca sanya, we will sooner or later be subjected to harsh suffering. In suttas, this is called sanya vipallasa. In Sinhala, it is called viparita sanya. I have used the phrase viparita sanya in several posts, and I need to change that to give the Pali phrase. Sanya vipallasa is actually the Pali phrase. This is the single most important thing that needs to be understood about the anicca nature. This is how we get into trouble, and this is why we all have stayed in the rebirth process for all this time. Once one understands this aspect, one can get to the Sotapanna stage. After one gets to the Sotapanna stage, in the next step, one will be able to see that even regular sense pleasures done in excess is of anicca nature and will lead to suffering in the future. But that suffering is not associated with the apayas or the four lowest realms. That is the suffering a Sotapanna would be subjected in the human and Deva realms. And those sufferings are stopped by getting to the next stage of Nibbana, that is the Anagami stage. But we will not get into that discussion yet. When someone who kills or steals to make money may indeed get rich and be happy in the short term. However, he or she will be paying much more harsh consequences in the future. If suitable conditions become available, one could get those vipaka later in this life. For example, police may catch somebody who stole or killed. Even if someone avoids getting caught, he may get into drinking or drug use and then die a miserable death. Even if he avoids that too, those vipaka will bring results in future rebirths. So this is why the Buddha said, those bad karma will follow oneself like a wheel of a cart that is following the steps of the ox pulling that cart. This is the famous Dhammapada Gatha, which goes like, Mano pubbangama dhamma, mano setta manomaya, manasache paduttena, bhasati va karoti va, tato nam sudukhamanveti, chakkangva vahato padam. So here mano pubbangama dhamma means everything has the mind as the precursor. When one acts or speaks with a defiled mind, that will lead to suffering. That is what is stated by manasache paduttena, bhasati va karoti va. When one has a defiled mind, one is uttering wrong speech and doing immoral things. Then that karma will follow one, just like that cart follows the ox. When one commits a bad karma, that will follow him or her, waiting for an opportunity to bring suitable vipaka. Okay, so we have gone off the track a bit here, but it is important to understand these basic ideas. So let us get back to the all-important verse, Yampicham nalabati tampi dukkham. The next word, nalabati, is actually two words. Na means not and labati means getting. Therefore, nalabati means not getting. Tampi is also two words, tam and pi, meaning that leads to. So the direct translation is of Yampicham nalabati tampi dukkham is suffering arises because one does not get what one desires. So let's think about that. Is it really true that suffering arises because one does not get what one desires? On the surface, it appears that at least in some cases, one does get what one wants. But the verse refers to long-term in the rebirth process. Even if one got everything one wanted during this life, one has to leave all that behind when one dies, and then one may face the consequences in the next life or in future lives. Therefore, when one takes the real meaning of icca in the phrase Yampi iccam nalabati tampi dukkham, this is true actually all the time. Now, this could be a shocking statement for many of you, so let us examine it in a bit more detail. It is not what one desires that counts, but what really matters is how the underlying nature of paticca samuppada is activated according to the actions initiated by that person. Therefore, even if it appears that one got one wanted by doing an akusala kamma or an immoral deed, in the long run that will lead to consequences that will be opposite of what one wanted. So this is an extremely important point. And so let us take some examples to analyze. For example, one may kill a lot of people with a remotely triggered bomb, or successfully cheat someone to make money in a transaction, or have a sexual relationship with a married person without getting caught, or tell a lie and successfully break up a friendship between two people. So we can see many examples like this, and in many cases it looks like they have succeeded and they didn't get caught. However, in all these cases, what one sees is not the end of the story. Those violations of dasa akusala will have consequences in future lives, if not later in this life. Laws of karma will make sure that one will be pursued with those bad karma vipaka, waiting for an opportunity to bring corresponding results. This is why laws of karma and rebirth are two main pillars of Buddha Dhamma. Therefore, in all those cases that we just discussed, eventually one will not get what one wished for. Not only that, one would get much more suffering than any temporary happiness that one may have enjoyed. So again we go to that summary statement from the first Desana. If something eventually leads to suffering, even if it brings immediate happiness, that is of anicca nature. In other words, Yampicham nalabati tampi dukkham always leads to suffering. But we are only considering the easiest to see case, where one does extremely immoral things to get what wants. So in our example about this person who kills a lot of people using a remotely triggered bomb, and suppose he avoids getting caught. He did this act with the Nicca Sanya of going to heaven and living happily thereafter. So after the successful killings, he would be very happy and live the rest of his life waiting for the heavenly birth in the next life. However, instead of that, he will be born in the apayas for millions of years for that action. In the end, it will bring unimaginable suffering to him, and he would be totally helpless for a long time to come. So remember the phrase, if something eventually leads to suffering, even if it brings immediate happiness, that is of anicca nature. Even though that person may have lived many years thinking that he got what he wanted, in the long run he would suffer so much. This is the hidden suffering that the Buddha talked about. As you can see, that cannot be understood unless one believes in the laws of karma or rebirth. The yardstick that evaluates whether a given action, speech or thought is bad is dasa akusala. If any action, speech or thought involves one or more of the dasa akusala or the 10 defilements, then that will lead to suffering in the long term. The stronger the akusala or the immoral deed, the stronger will be the corresponding suffering. I also want to mention another important aspect of this. A bad thought coming to the mind is, in most cases, a kamma vipaka. But if one starts to consciously thinking about those in the same line of thought, then it becomes a strong kamma called a kamma pata. A kamma pata means basically a kamma that is complete. Such a kamma pata can trigger rebirths and are really apunya abhisankhara or bad abhisankhara that can lead to bad births. There are 4 stages by which kamma is completed and thus become a kamma pata. Partially completed kamma can only bring vipaka during a lifetime, and these are called pavutti kamma. So let us take an example to illustrate this point. In the case of killing person X, the following are the 4 stages. A living being X need to exist, and someone makes a plan to kill X, and then the plan is carried out, and eventually X becomes dead as a result of that action. So suppose person Y plans to kill X, but never carried out that plan. Then it just becomes a pavutti vipaka. There will be consequences due to those bad thoughts associated with planning, but that will not lead to a bad rebirth. It will just lead to kamma vipaka during a life. But if Y actually carries out the plan, and as a result of that action X died, then it becomes a kamma pata for Y. And then that kamma pata could bring him a bad birth in the future. It is important to realize that the vipaka depends on what kind of living being is killed too. Killing a human is much worse than killing a monkey, for example, and killing a monkey is much worse than killing an ant. The vipaka is proportional to the level of consciousness of that living being, so to speak. Killing a sotapanna is much worse than killing a normal human, and killing an arahant is the worst kind of a kamma, called an anantariya kamma. Just injuring a Buddha belongs to that same category of anantariya kamma. Another important aspect of this is that only kaya and vachi sankhara can become kamma pata, not mano sankhara. One has to complete a bodily action or speech. As I have discussed in many posts, mano sankhara comes to the mind automatically based on one's gati. So they do not lead to kamma vipaka. However, if then one starts consciously thinking along those lines, then it could become an actual karma or an karma pata. It is also important to realize that vachi sankhara includes talking to oneself. It is not necessary to speak out. So it is important to read the post entitled The Correct Meaning of Vachi Sankhara. Therefore, only completed karma or karma pata that involve speech and bodily actions lead to future rebirths. But talking to oneself is included as speech. So one must be very careful with that. One should always be mindful and stop bad thoughts as soon as one becomes aware of them. This is the basis of Satipatthana Bhavana. I am going to all these details because these become important in later desanas. Without proper background, it is not possible to understand the deeper aspects of Tilakkhana. So, if one has skipped the first desana, I would urge to stop and listen to that first. Otherwise, one will be wasting time in the long term. At this stage, we will restrict our discussion to the worst of the dasakusala that involves bad karma pata that can lead to rebirths in the apayas or the four lowest realms, including the animal realm. There are also good karma pata too. Those are due to good karma, like giving and helping others, and those lead to rebirth in the good realms, like the human and deva realms. Right now we are focusing on the Sotapanna stage, and the goal here is to stop rebirths in the apayas. What one needs to realize here is that one does a bad karma pata or an akusala karma with icca or craving for a sense pleasure. When person X engages in rape or sexual relationship with a married person, X just wants to fulfill his or her sexual desires and believes that one will become happy by fulfilling that desire. That is the nicca sanya that X has while planning and engaging in that activity. Suppose X is able to engage in that activity without getting caught and then dies. Since it's sexual misconduct, it is likely that X would be born an animal in a future rebirth. It is at that time that X would face the real consequences of those actions. X would never have wanted to be born an animal. X's desire or iccha was to have sense pleasures. But once born an animal, X would be subjected to thousandfold more suffering. Therefore, at the end, the phrase yam piccang nalabati tampi dukkham holds true. X would be subjected to suffering because eventually X would not get what X wanted or desired with those particular actions. This is why one cannot even begin to comprehend Buddha Dhamma, let alone Tilakkhana, without believing in the loss of karma or rebirth. Any break of dasakusala will lead to suffering, regardless of what one desired or would have liked. Therefore, it is dangerous to have such a nicca sanya for bad actions and to do them with craving or iccha. This is the first stage of comprehending anicca nature. That is to realize that if one does immoral actions with nicca sanya, that is the worst sanya to have. Such actions are always of anicca nature, and they will never yield what one wished for, and eventually will lead to suffering. We will go to deeper levels of this analysis in the future, where we will discuss how any action involving desire or iccha for worldly pleasures will always be of anicca nature. But we need to take one step at a time. Instead of that, we will look at this from another angle, which is Paticca Samuppada. Actually, this is the formal and detailed explanation of how karma bring vipaka according to the nature of the karma, instead of what one wishes. So, please pay attention and pause the play button and think through when needed. These fundamentals are essential in order to get a deeper understanding. Let us take the example where one kills a lot of people with a remotely triggered bomb. Here one gets the idea of killing those people based on someone's teachings. So he thinks, yes, this is an easy way to get to heaven. So he starts planning to make a bomb, where to place it and things like that. He will be doing a lot of vachi sankhara and also kaya sankhara to get all this done. The Paticca Samuppada step of avidya paccaya sankhara, sankhara paccaya vijnana will start building a bad vijnana for killing people, even in the early stages of planning. Now, I would really recommend the post, Vijnana, what it really means, before proceeding any longer, if you have not read that post. Vijnana is not merely consciousness. Vijnana is a defiled consciousness with which we do akusala karma, and those then lead to bad karma vipaka. Here I want to point out another important point. Vijnana is not something that is unchanging. As the Buddha told the Sati Bhikkhu, there is no vijnana permanently associated with a person. Vijnana is a defiled mindset that can change even moment to moment. For example, even that person who is making a bomb to blow up people may have done good deeds in the past. Such a good action was done with a good vijnana. Planning to make a bomb for killing people is done with a bad vijnana. A good vijnana done by the same person will lead to good results. This is why we cannot say there is an unchanging self. But obviously there is a person who is doing these good and bad deeds, so we cannot say there is no self either. Someone's actions at a given time depends on what his or her vijnana is at that time. That is cause and effect, or Paticca Samuppada in Buddha Dhamma. The critical point to remember is that if one keeps engaged in a certain activity, good or bad, vijnana for that action grows and, as the Buddha stated, gets established in the karma bhava. What this means is that vijnana can keep coming back to one's mind. If one is not mindful, one could be going downhill in the wrong direction and build up a vijnana that can come to one's mind at the Chuti-patisandhi moment, when one is about to grasp a new bhava or a new existence. That is how one gets a bad rebirth. By the way, karma bhava is the same as the namaloka, and dhamma in the namaloka are the same as vijnana that are established in the karma bhava. So let me repeat it again. Karma bhava is the same as namaloka, and dhamma in the namaloka are the same as vijnana that are established in the karma bhava. So you may want to think about that a bit. This will help clear some confusion. There may be subtle differences in these terms, but they are essentially the same. Dhamma, or those established vijnana, are called anidassana appatiga rupa. That means rupa that cannot be seen or made contact with. And those are just energies lying below the suddhashtaka stage. All the matter that we see are made of suddhashtaka, but these vijnana are just energies lying below the suddhashtaka stage. This is a deeper point and is discussed in the posts What are Dhamma? A deeper analysis, and Our Two Worlds, Material and Mental. So this is a deeper aspect, and if one is not really interested in deeper analysis, it's not necessary to read them. But it is a good idea to have at least some idea about this connection. So let's get back to the discussion of this person who is making a bomb to kill many people. In the early stages of planning, it will be mainly mano sankhara and vachi sankhara. Those thoughts will be coming to his mind frequently as mano sankhara, and then he will be consciously thinking about how to get it done. The more he thinks and plans, that vijnana will grow. This is very important. In Buddha's words, that bad vijnana will get established in the kamma bhava. When that vijnana is established in the kamma bhava, it becomes a dhamma that can come to one's mind via the mana indriya. Just like seeing an attractive figure directs one's thoughts in that direction, or smelling good food gets one to think about food, those dhamma coming back to the mind will get that person to think about making the bomb. So if you like more details on that, you need to read the post, What are Dhamma? Dhamma are Rupa too. So now it becomes a loop. More conscious thoughts and planning will make that bad vijnana grow, and in turn, that bad vijnana will keep coming back to his mind even when he is doing other things. Then the vijnana paccaya nama rupa step is also in progress. He will be imagining how he buys parts for the bomb, assemble it, and finally set it up. All those pictures will be going through his mind. These are the nama rupa. This is, of course, feeds this nama rupa formation will in turn feed that vijnana too in the reverse step of nama rupa paccaya vijnana. Paticca samuppada does not just go in one direction. That then leads to nama rupa paccaya salayatana. All his 6 sense doors will be utilized for this project. Now we need to understand the difference between the sense doors or the indriya and ayatana. For example, eyes are our sense doors that we use to see. If it is just seeing, the eyes act as indriya. However, if those eyes are deliberately used to focus on a given immoral task, then they are being used as ayatana. Now, salayatana means 6 ayatana, those 5 physical senses and the mind being used for immoral deeds. In our case, this person will now be reading and listening to videos about how to make the bomb. He will go out and collect parts. And also, even more importantly, his mana indriya will act as a manayatana and will be thinking and planning on how to make the bomb and set it off. That means salayatana paccaya phassa is already at work. Here phassa really means sampassa, because those are defiled contacts. And those will lead to sampassaja vedana. That is what he will be feeling. And those feelings are rooted in those bad actions or sun, or these defiled actions. Those sampassaja vedana are all mind created, and he will like that. The vedana paccaya tanha will get him more involved in that task. We need to keep in mind that all this time he has a nicca sanya about this project. He thinks it will lead to happiness for him. As a consequence of this action, he is supposed to be born in heaven. That is not merely avijja, but it is moha. His mind is totally covered. So now, tanha paccaya upadana will keep him occupied with this task. Upadana paccaya bhava and bhava paccaya jati will make him born in that mind state of a killer many times a day while he is planning and assembling the bomb. That means many paticca samuppada cycles will be operating in a given day, reinforcing all these steps. All these are Pautti Paticca Samuppada cycles. You may want to read the section on Paticca Samuppada if this is not clear. Now one day he will carry out the attack and kill some people. Then that karma will become a karma pata, a fully completed karma. Furthermore, that bad vijnana would become much more established in the karma bhava and now has the power to bring a bad birth for him. In other words, it has become an uppatti bhava, depending on the damage done. For example, how many people were killed. It could bring in a bad vipaka for millions, if not billions of years to come. Another side point here is that the strength of the karmic energy associated with that action also depends on who was killed with the bomb. For example, if without even known to the killer, his father or mother somehow was there and got killed, then it would become an anantariya karma for him. So this is an important point. The intention to kill is the root cause, but the magnitude of the karma vipaka depends on the damage done as a result of that action, and he may not even be aware of that damage. For example, in the previous example, one of his parents may have been killed. There is no super being who is monitoring one's actions. We are all interconnected, and the vipaka are accounted for by automatically by the nature. This is why new findings in quantum mechanics are providing evidence to support Buddha Dhamma. You may want to read the post, Quantum Entanglement. We are all connected. So what comes next is totally unexpected by that person, and that is the scariest part. The next birth is not according to what he desired, but depends on the enormity of the bad karma done by killing those people. So the bottom line is that the person did not understand that engaging in dasa akusala is of anicca nature. Instead, based on what he was taught, he believed that his actions would be of nicca nature and would bring him happiness or sukha, and therefore he would go to heaven and live happily thereafter. And that is the sense of atta nature that he was imagining. As we discussed in the first desana, nicca nature, which is the opposite of anicca, implies a sense of predictability, a sense of safety and happiness. For example, if I get a good job, all my problems will be solved kind of mindset. Then that implies a happy future for oneself, and that is the perception of sukha. If both are true, that means one is in full control of one's future, and one will never become helpless, and that is the perception of atta, the opposite of anatta. So the above person's thinking is along the same lines, and he will have nicca, sukha and atta sanya about his project. If I successfully kill those people with this bomb, all my problems will be solved. I will be in full control of my future forever. But of course, the reality is the opposite, and the future is unimaginably dark for him. He will suffer in the worst realms, much worse than the animal realm. Therefore, he had the incorrect nicca sanya about the world. That is called a sanya vipallasa, or distorted sanya, as we mentioned earlier. In the end, any action seeking pleasures with anything in this world is of anicca nature. But that has to be understood one step at a time. So we have talked about how the wrong perception of nicca sanya originates with icca or cravings, and how this wrong perception of nicca leads to sukha sanya, which in turn leads to nicca and atta sanya. Then one can do immoral things with those wrong sanya or with sanya vipallasa, and will be subjected to much suffering in the future. And as a result, will become helpless or anatta. That is anicca, dukkha, anatta nature embedded in Tilakkhana. So that is the essence of anicca, dukkha, anatta in Tilakkhana. We will discuss more details and more aspects in the next Desana. Tilakkhana can be analyzed in many different ways, but they are all interconsistent and interrelated. May the blessings of the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha be with you always.